I know the time will come when we welcome everyone, yeah. Even the young and the old. We're here to soothe your soul.
How many people here are familiar with psychology? Okay. Surface. Okay. All right. So for me, the whole thing about breaking the mind control aspect of things is to use psychology as the main tool. And I know astrology, in fact, is the most ancient form of psychology. But since then, we've had some really great thinkers, philosophers, who've developed the tools of psychology and have really delved deep into their own consciousness and seen the aspects of our psyche and given it a bit of, what's the best word to use? Giving it some light and form, where before, using things like astrology and stars was one aspect of it, but it really didn't delve deep into the more minutiae details of what psychology is about. So this is part one of my series. I have my own YouTube channel where I'll be bringing out the other parts. Perhaps maybe in the future I'll do part two here. We'll see. I've got many things on the shelf. So the first thing to do is establish what trauma is. And the first type of trauma is the individual trauma. So we'll be talking about that first. So we have the ancestral trauma, the trauma from our ancestors who've gone through many upheavals, through wars, cataclysms, and we have also the birth trauma. Now, not a lot of people talk about the birth trauma. But there seems to be at some point, a disconnect from how women naturally gave birth. Now, it's all, the birth that we have in modern times is not natural at all. Going into a hospital with bright lights, gas and air, and epidurals, it's a really traumatic thing. And I like Otto Rank, who was a student of Freud, but also broke away from Freud's theories. And he came up with the idea that actually the development of somebody's individuality already happens in the womb. It already happens before the child is even born into the world. And his reasons, scientific reasons, and his explanations for it is, well, whatever, if the mother's body is feeding the child, then in turn her psyche is also feeding the child through the nervous system, and that's wiring the child into specific individuality. So that's one thing that he brought to the surface, and I really like that about his research. So that's why I've included birth as a trauma. There's a whole load of solutions, and there's a lot of great women out there that are already doing teaching women how to do natural births, how to set the setting for natural births. And some of these women have had orgasmic experiences giving birth to children, which is incredible. And you kind of hear these testimonies from them, and it really flips the whole narrative that we've been told about birth, giving birth. So the next one is parental trauma. Now, can't really blame the parents, because they had parents too, and their parents had parents, and so on and so on. So there is this, and it also links back to the ancestral. But our immediate parents. Some of the times, people have children. Couples have children without actually thinking it through for why they want kids, because it's expected. It's this type of, we all want to reproduce, but most of us don't really get to a point where we know ourselves enough before having children. And sometimes when we're unconscious of certain things, those traumas that we have unresolved gets passed on to the children. And with the way we raise our children, the way the children watch us and observe us, and the way we treat them. So you have that aspect too. The next one is societal trauma. So societal, well, it's pretty self-explanatory. We see what the masses are like. We have society of what was termed as a superego by Freud. The superego is the voice of society in your head. What's expected of those around you. That's what, when you hear the word superego, that's what superego is. It's the voice of the collective or the immediate society. And society in itself has a sort of, it's the madness of the crowd, so to speak. We've seen what it's like during the pandemic, and everybody lining up, and the shaming and the virtue signaling and the gaslighting. We've all been through it. So we have that as a form of trauma because, well, if you're not aware and you're kind of suddenly waking up to all the conspiratorial elements, you start to realize, hold on, my school teachers, my doctors, all of those people were all, propagating the trauma. Is it possible someone can kind of write it down on that side or close the door? Can someone get Joss, please?
Maybe at the bottom there might be a lock.
All right, thank you. So the next you have is the collective trauma. We've had, I'm sure some of you have researched into Tartaria and the mud floods. How many of you have or are familiar with Tartaria and the mud floods and resets? Yeah. So we have the resets. And resets has happened many, many times. There is a great researcher called Jason Breshears. He's uncovered a lot of interesting patterns in the resets. Apparently, according to his research, it happens every 138 years. Some of them are localized, and some of them are worldwide, or in big areas. So we've had these resets, or cataclysms as well, as we call it. The next is wars. That's self-explanatory in itself. Slavery. I mean, we have slavery today. Even today, we're all in some shape or form enslaved because we all need something called money. And the only way to free yourself within that is to do your vocation, become a creator, rather than somebody who's not creating and part of a company or a system. And I don't mean to shame ever. I used to work for a company. Everybody, I'm sure most people here have worked for a company or other. And if you haven't, good for you, more power to you. But, slavery is part of a trauma that we've all been through. Finally, is genetic manipulation. Everything is manipulated in our genes through water, as you've seen from Jay's talk, the hybridized food, genetically modified food, the geoengineering or chemtrails. It's everywhere. There's this attack on the body, because when you affect the body, you affect the mind, you affect the soul. And that is the aim. They're coming from the outside, trying to affect the inside. And that is another form of trauma. So, how many people here are familiar with the shadow aspect of psychology? Right, Joy. Okay, so not many of you. Now, Carl Jung, I'm going to just read this quote. Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. If an inferiority is conscious, one always has a chance to correct it. But if it is repressed and isolated from consciousness, it never gets corrected and is liable to burst forth suddenly in a moment of unawareness. At all counts, it forms an unconscious snag, thwarting our most well-meant intentions. Now, how many times have people gone into an argument with their friends or their partner or maybe even somebody in the street who's triggered you and really got you angry? Those are all part of our shadow and our unconscious. Things that trigger you and get you to become emotionally wild, so to speak, is a signal to what you haven't integrated in yourself. And I'll be going through that. But Carl Jung termed and coined the term the shadow, and it is present in everybody, and it's up to us to do the individual work to integrate the shadow, not destroy it. So the shadow, as said in Carl Jung's work, I've got all the references there at the bottom. If anybody's interested, you can come after the presentation. I'll be more than happy to share references. So the shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality. For no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. To become conscious of it involves recognizing the dark aspects of the personality as present and real. This act is the essential condition for any kind of self-knowledge, and it therefore, as a rule, meets with considerable resistance. Indeed, self-knowledge as a psychotherapeutic measure frequently requires much painstaking work extending over a long period. So it's one of the biggest challenges, and there's a great quote by Carl Jung who says, "Where your fear is, there is your task." And most fear is always within. It's something that we experience inwardly. Another quote here. If we understand anything of the unconscious, we know that it cannot be swallowed. We also know that it is dangerous to suppress it, because the unconscious is life, and this life turns against us if suppressed, as happens in neurosis. So most neurotic people have this suppressed part of their personalities, and they're not conscious of it. So I'm going to skip that quote because there's too many quotes here. So what is the shadow? The shadow is the repressed or dark part of one's personality. The part rejected by family, by community, by society, which is the superego I mentioned earlier, and the destructive side of the personality. On the flip side, your shadow is also the positive aspects and the creative side of your personality. And that is what is shut down by your educators, by your parents, out of fear, out of envy, ignorance, and projected self-hatred. So if you have a certain talent, sometimes your parents, if they haven't done the work on themselves, they'll repress those talents in you and won't let you express that. So there are then what happens as you grow up, as from childhood you get into adulthood, and you repress those positive aspects, and you never really explore the creative side of your personality, or the more the powerful talents that you hold latent within you. That's why we always see these films in Hollywood. People love all these heroic films and the underdog. Why? Because it's a reflection of themselves. They use that formula because they know that that is part of how much is repressed in society already. And that's why Rome always brought the Colosseum, and the modern day today is sports and the cinema, in the theater, of course, but mostly the cinema and sports is used as a form of distraction from you know, I'm not saying that cinema doesn't have great things to offer. I think, you know, there's also beautiful art in cinema. There's beautiful things about sports, but in a way, it can also act as a distraction when you get into a collectivized cult with it. So I've got to be specific with saying that, otherwise people get the wrong idea. So, the shadow is the obligation to abide by social norms and expectations, which causes us to repress or oppress, because repression is oppression. You're oppressing yourself, ultimately, which is oppressing our innate abilities, impulses, and talents. If one cultivated and developed these, he or she has the potential to be a more effective being in the world. Imagine if we all did this. Many get confused with the term shadow and shadow work. So this is what I wanted to clarify, because I've been through many kind of events and festivals, and I hear this shadow work, and when I ask them to explain it to me, they bring about this sort of new age movement terminology to shadow work, which isn't exactly, in fact, they just have no idea. They're just talking about just the dark aspects. And then when I say to them, do you know there's positive aspects to it too? And they think, what are you talking about? No, it's just the negative stuff. And I just don't address and they don't address the negative. In fact, they just leave it out. They deny it instead of looking at it and integrating it. So they think it is someone who. Yeah, there's a grammatical error there. It is someone who actively integrates the bad characteristics of themselves because of its name or label, and about the realization of evil. This is the wrong idea, right? It's based on opposites, and the only way in trying to become well-rounded is to not ignore anything, but accept all the parts of yourself. And that they're real and it's possible. And it's got nothing to do with becoming spiteful or malevolent. In fact, it's the ability to be powerful and dangerous. So what do I mean by dangerous? One is dangerous when they're doing creative things or when they are becoming a creator in their life. You're a danger to the system. You're a danger to the elite the moment you do that. And danger in a good way, because becoming dangerous is how do you say it? There is a positive aspect to becoming dangerous, because people who are part of the system, when you arm yourself with self-knowledge, with gnosis of know thyself, right? Who can challenge you and try and make you look into a liar or a negative person? They can't, because you'll have the tools in you and the sight and the foresight to be able to completely dispel any attacks that come your way. So that's the good aspect of becoming dangerous. So it's also about honing the aggressive emotional energy that we hold. Now, when we're angry, those are very healthy attitudes to have. I mean, there's nothing wrong with becoming angry. But if you're using that rage and anger to try and attack somebody or put somebody down, then you're not actually using it correctly, because it's an energy. You can take that aggressive energy and create something with it. And that's a more productive way, in my opinion, to use anger. And even if you use martial arts in a controlled manner or something like that, if you have that sort of aggression, just to improve your physical body.
Martial arts is a discipline as well, so you're using that angry energy, but in a disciplined way.
Yep.
So you are disciplining your body and you're teaching it to use it in that way, not in a reckless way.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I had a very abusive father. I grew up with a lot of domestic violence in my home. He almost killed me twice. I was thrown down the stairs one time, cracked my head open. He threw me against the floor when I was like 7. Almost cracked my back, and I went through a lot of anger. I had a lot of anger growing up, and I had a lot of repression. And martial arts was one of those ways. I found martial arts. I started off with football, but I went into martial arts from the age of 15. And through that, I became very proficient and very disciplined with it. And what it allowed me to do is to hone that anger and put it into my body for the benefit of my body, so that I was able to then stand up for myself. It gave me the confidence to stand up, that I know that I can do damage to somebody, but not out of what was the self-satisfaction, more out of self-defense, but to use it to a certain degree where I do not use it to really hurt somebody, but enough to defend myself. There is a certain degree of what you can do, but martial arts is certainly one of them. So you go through a more mental exercise and use the psychosomatic tools so that you can become powerful internally and externally, to become a force for good that understands evil. We all have evil within us, otherwise we wouldn't recognize it outside of us. The difference is that we choose not to. That's what makes us different. So they know that they can be capable of it, but does not partake in it. There's a difference to knowing you're capable of it, but not partaking in it. So how to recognize it? So projection is one way. The key moments when our shadow displays itself. So we will project our qualities we do not like about ourselves onto others because we do not want to deal with it in ourselves. I'll give you an example. I mean, when during the height of the lockdown, I was walking around into Waitrose or somewhere and not wearing a mask, and I would trigger so many people. This is when it was at the height, when everybody was wearing masks. So I would get a woman or a guy come up to me, and this would happen at least once, twice a week when I go for my shopping. And why are you not wearing a mask? And I said, well, because I want to breathe. It was a simple thing. I want to breathe, and I don't believe in masks. So, and they'll get triggered. Like, no, you're being selfish. There's something wrong. So this is them projecting their shadow onto me. And that is part of what they're triggered by the fact that I didn't wear it. And these are people that are not aware of their own shadow. So they get triggered by just somebody not wearing something. I mean, that's like quite a big one. So most people are not even aware of their shadows, let alone being aware of it. So that's one example. So on the opposite end, our noble and positive shadow traits are projected onto the people we like, admire, or fall in love with. So sometimes that's what you call shadow possession. You project your shadow, the positive aspects that you've repressed, onto the people you like. That's why you get the idol worshipping in the media and in music and so on. You got all these fan clubs and so on, because this is like repressed shadows projected onto these idols, so-called idols. So projection, whether light or dark, is always something self-defeating. You not only burden another person with your dark elements or pressures of idolization, but you also avoid taking responsibility for your shadow and lose the opportunity of finding a state of wholeness and what Jung calls individuation. Anybody heard of the word individuation? Yeah. So to individuate is to become a whole person, to become balanced. Or as Plato says, know thyself, knowing yourself. So what techniques are there to integrate the shadow? So this is a quote by Carl Jung. There is no generally effective technique for assimilating the shadow. It is more like diplomacy or statesmanship, and it is always an individual matter. So that will rely on you individually, because nobody knows you better than you. right? You can go to your psychologist or sit in that chair. Ain't gonna do nothing for you, pretty much. If you're not educating yourself on these tools and finding ways that works for you as an individual, because it is individual. Everybody is a unique soul, just like a fingerprint. Everything is unique about you. So there's only going to be one way, which is your way of individuating and doing the shadow work. But these are some examples that I can provide, whatever resonates for you. So first, one has to accept and take seriously the existence of the shadow. Second, one has to become aware of its qualities and intentions. This happens through conscientious attention to your moods, your fantasies, and impulses. Third, a long process of negotiation is unavoidable. So you're going to have to find a way to negotiate with that part of yourself. So to become aware of your shadow, you need to integrate it into your consciousness. That's the first thing. How many of you observe your thoughts on a day-to-day basis while you're cooking or while you're... Okay, so there are some of you. Become more observant. Become the observer of your thoughts rather than actually becoming the thought itself. Because you are not... The thing is, we are antenna receivers. Sometimes the thought field out there is not necessarily your thoughts. Sometimes it's the programming. Sometimes it's the trauma, the unresolved trauma. So it's not necessarily truly coming from yourself, some of these thoughts. But watch them, observe them, see what they do. I think the more we become observant of our thoughts, the better that our consciousness can start filtering these thoughts that don't need, like thoughts in the past, thoughts about relationships, about people that are in our lives, right? They come in, right? They come into us. It's something that a relationship that ended a while back, something comes in about that person. A repetition, exactly. Why is it there? And part of that is because there's certain aspects of your shadow that you need to integrate about that experience of that relationship you had with so-and-so. So the more you're able to integrate, the more you're able to let go of that past and move forward. And that no longer possesses you. That's what shadow possession is. So, pay attention to what makes you angry or aggressive. As I said earlier, for example, when someone's behaving arrogantly and you become very angry, chances are that you are arrogant too. Because if you already know and recognize that aspect in yourself, that won't anger you. You just see it for what it is. You see it that's their problem, not yours. And they're just projecting it onto you. If you're reactive, then you're falling into the trap of your shadow. So if you repress it into your unconscious and you project it onto others, so you have to be brutally honest with yourself in order to find out what your shadow is. And this takes a lot of courage and a lot of self-honesty as well. Most people find this task or this subject matter very daunting. But I think it's really important to address it because we're not educated about this in schools. And even if you go into universities, they don't go into the depth. You have now Jungians, and there's a certain movement of Jungians, and the Jungians are failing society as well today. And again, it's individual because it's you. You know yourself better. You can go and sit on a chair or a bed in the psychiatrist's office. But what happens? You're telling them about yourself, so you're already in charge. So you're already the filter. How honest are you being to the psychoanalyst or psychologist? So that psychology in terms of its treatment and therapy has its limits if you're not already doing the work yourself. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay.
You were talking about fingerprints.
Yes.
It proves that there is an intelligence before we get here.
Yes.
And our life is mapped before us already. It's just that we're meant to go through it, we signed the contract, and here we are.
Well, it depends what you mean by contract.
You made an agreement to be here, although you knew what you was coming into, but your memory's been wiped, you're here. You understand
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. Reincarnation. I've seen a lot of evidence about reincarnation as well from accounts of children who wake up to, who are born quite young, around the age of 7. When they start talking, they find the murderer of so and so that was never resolved, and these are kind of unexplained cases, and these happen independently in different countries. And when you read about these accounts, you start to think, okay, well, yeah. That's in itself. That's a whole talk in itself, and we can. I mean, it's eternal. This intelligence, it's eternal. And what you call God or your soul or the oversoul is that entire source. There's so many labels for it. Exactly. That's what Jesus, if he was here today, he'd be doing this. He's like, I wanted to tell you that God was inside you, but now you're worshiping me instead. And that is the issue with religion and so on. So yeah, God is within, but not in an arrogant way, not in a sort of you're mightier than, better than others kind of way, now that you're God. It's more recognizing that God is within. It's just sometimes our self-image and our ego gets in the way of that. And, it's love. It's unconditional love. Yeah. Okay, so you've had a near-death experience. Okay.
It's just a black void to begin with. Completely. What happens is you lose your eyesight from the outside.
Yep.
It disappears, but before that, the clouds turn all different colours of the rainbow. You then find yourself in a black void. When you're in that black void, you feel energies, but you feel unconditional love. You feel compassion. You feel everything. You feel every emotion, and it's in the waves.
Yep.
Although you can't see nothing, you've got no body.
Yep.
It's just absolute, and you say to yourself, great, you just don't want to go back to where you come from. They wipe your memory before you go over, so you don't know you've had the accident. You don't know what's happened to you. You just find yourself there.
Yep.
Understand where I'm coming from? And once you're there, you feel like energy's pulling you left and right, and you feel like you're moving forward, but you're not. It's really strange. You hear a voice that says, "It's not your time yet." That's a fact, right? But this voice I can't replicate.
It's all within us. It's if we quieten. I'm thinking through even altered states of consciousness. I work with psychedelics, so in a shamanic way. So when you work with things like mushrooms, you're able to actually go into that voice and hear it. But it takes considerable effort.
I was only 10 years old.
Yeah.
I fell out of the tree on spear-shaped railings and ripped my arm off, so I've bled to death.
Wow.
Whole year on my back contraction, put it all back together, became a bionic man now.
Oh wow! Incredible. 1977.
But that's an experience for you. So I mean, I know that there is life after death. I'm absolutely adamant that there is.
Oh yeah, we are eternal beings. We are eternal beings. It's just that there will only be you this one time. But you probably reincarnated into different personalities. But what is the point of it? And part of it is you are actually you're here to learn and grow, and that soul will remember all those lives. It's all part of it. What happens after? Well, that's the great mystery, isn't it? And that's for us to not try and fathom in our human forms. I think there is such a beautiful thing about leaving things mysterious. If you knew everything, what's the point in being here? The whole point is that there is a mystery behind it. But what's more important is to focus on your individual self, on your incarnation here on this realm. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that, contributing. So, shadow work. You've got to find a healthy, productive, or at the very least controlled outlet for either repressed aggression or also sexual urges. Right? Because sexuality, you can't, same thing when you speak about spirituality or religion, you cannot separate sex from it. It's all part and parcel. We have a body, we're in a body, we're going to have urges. It's natural. And, there's definite, but when we talk about sexual, we also talk about creative, because sexuality is also creative energy too. So it's about how you harness that energy and find it in a healthy way. So you have the creative things like writing, drawing, painting, music. These are just some examples of doing shadow work. Martial arts, dance, expressive movement, singing. These are all parts of doing shadow work, of expressing yourself creatively. So don't be afraid to sing in the shower. Yes. Yeah. You got kids as well. Trigger them. Trigger their shadows.
Everyone can sing. You don't have to be, pitch perfect. Everybody can sing.
Yeah.
Have a voice so we can all sing.
It's a muscle. It's a muscle. Same thing. Muscles, and I'll go into the psychosomatic in a minute and why everything in our body contains a form of trauma or, everyone thinks it's in their head, but it isn't. Yeah, muscle has memory, indeed. But before we get into that, I want to talk about the animus. This is for you ladies as well. This is more for the ladies. So the animus is the masculine part of a woman. It's objectivity, logic, reason, facts, convictions, and general rules. The animus forms like the anima within men. We'll talk about the anima a bit later for the gentlemen in here. The animus forms the bridge to the unconscious, since the animus is partly nested in the conscious, in our consciousness, and partly in the unconscious. So it acts as a bridge between the things that you're not aware of and what you are aware of. Your masculinity and femininity should be in harmony. Yeah, the whole yin and yang aspect. You need both of them. Once this is in harmony, once this harmony is established, the animus will help the woman to integrate her shadow. So the animus is your best friend. The masculine part of you is your best friend. Because you're already a woman, you're already feminine. It's the masculine aspect. And when I talk about masculinity and femininity, I'm not talking about gender. I'm talking about typology. It's a form of energy. It's a type of energy, an energetic intelligence. So that's what your animus is. It's the masculine part, which is order, which is sun, light. The same thing when you talk about femininity is chaos, dark, but that doesn't mean it's bad. In fact, you need darkness. You need the womb. It's the warmth. I go to sleep. When I go to sleep, I go into the womb. The warmth. I cover myself in the sheets. There's something beautiful about that. Yeah. Yeah. So always look at it as a typology, because people, when they talk about masculinity and femininity, they mistaken it for gender. It's not. So the animus is the masculine archetype, and thus of a nature that goes beyond the personal level, because it goes back to creation, to the source, to what you call the creator or God, or whatever label you want to use, the infinite. So the animus is the masculine archetype, and thus of a nature that goes beyond the personal level. A part of the animus is personal and should be integrated by women, but when they can't make the distinction between the personal animus and the great king, the masculine archetype that goes beyond the personal level, then they will become animus possessed. When a woman is possessed by her animus, she's aggressive, judgmental, cold, obstinate, and constantly criticizing others and herself. She has a lust for power, and she perceives everything as a competition that she needs to win. She wants to dominate others, and she's always looking for quarrel and control as well. And where do we see that today in society? As a collective, we see it in the modern feminist movement. I haven't got anything against feminism itself. I'm talking about how the feminist movement today is being used against women, by the way. And it's all part of destroying the family unit. Yep. Because you're made to hate males in the patriarchy, when in fact it's all a part of you. You already have the masculine. That patriarchy is already part of your nature anyway. It's just the other half. It's just the way you look at it. But again, that's a whole other talk in and of itself. How that, but I will be going into that in a part 2 or part 3 at some point, because it's a very deep thing that the elite are using against women. And by the way, most of the mind control and most of consumerism is aimed at women. Why? Because you are the most powerful in terms of you actually are the women. You're the one that bring the children into the world. And you're the one that affects the child from conception all the way from birth and the first most important years, which is called the Oedipus stages. Right? A Rothschild, I think, said that give me a child between the age of, 1 and 7, and I'll show you the man. You know?
Was it Oedipus?
Oedipus, yeah. Oedipus. That's the Oedipus complex that Freud termed. But, those are really, really pivotal years. Rudolf Steiner as well. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Rudolf Steiner. Rudolf Steiner talks about that period. That's when the child learns about social constructs. So when they play, they should be allowed to play during that time. And if they don't get that play time, this is why they're trying to get kids at around 5 or 6 to start learning maths and English. No, should be learning anything other than playing. And the imagination, they should stay in that imaginative state, because that imagination is so powerful, because that is what connects you to the source. That's what makes you bring out the most creative and the most inventive things. It is our imagination. And the more we hone that, the more the child in later, as they become a grown human man and woman, they're able to use these tools to really empower their lives. And that the most successful people use their imagination. People who've kind of come with the greatest books, Tolkien to whatever, like the greatest artists, even those who create great businesses, creative businesses and businesses that benefit others, have done the same. They use and cultivate their imagination. It's also part of the manifestation process as well. One of your superpowers, by the way. So, continuing on, the animus, she is convinced that the other person, this is when we're talking about the animus-possessed woman, she is convinced that the other person is always in the wrong, and she is their victim that longs for justice, which is really revenge, spite. She is not able to see beyond the general rules to see the exceptions. A typical animus story is the one of Beauty and the Beast. The beast is the aggressive and primitive animus in the woman's psyche. This is why they use these stories. They know, because they know our psychology. And if we're not aware, you're watching a movie or whatever, you're not aware of what is actually going on in these archetypal or allegorical stories. Bel has to make him civilized, make him feel and turn him into a prince, right? That is the task waiting for all women who are animus possessed. She needs to tame the beast within her masculine part, that is. The development of the animus will go through 4 stages. The first is the physically strong man, like Tarzan or Hercules. After the first part, so this will appear in your dreams as well. So if you see these archetypes, you may see them in your dreams. If you see these sort of figures. After the first part of development, he goes to this second phase in which he becomes someone who can initiate action, like a friend. In the third phase, he becomes the animus, he becomes the word depicted as a professor or clergyman. And finally, in the last phase, the animus transforms to meaning. It is the mediator of spiritual experience that gives the woman inner spiritual firmness as compensation for her outer softness. It will give her new ideas and release her creativity. So these aspects of our psyche are really important to integrate for you ladies. And now I'll go on to the anima. Does that make sense? Is that making sense for you? Yeah? Okay. So, the anima, for you men. So, the anima is the feminine part of our psyche. It's vague feelings and moods, it's prophetic hunches, it's irrationality, love and feelings for nature. The anima forms, like the animus, the bridge between your conscious and your unconscious. Same thing. It's just the opposite in men. So your masculinity and your femininity should be in harmony as well, as it was for the animus in women. You need to both of them. So once this harmony is established, the anima will help the man to integrate his shadow as well. Same thing. It's just the union of opposites. The anima expresses itself in dreams as a woman. When the dreamer has a positive relationship with his mother, the anima is likely to be positive as well. So see if I don't know how many of you remember your dreams here. Does anyone remember their dreams? Yeah. Yeah. Have a diary. I really recommend a dream diary. I really, really recommend it, because if you want to investigate your psyche, that is the best way to investigate, using the dream world, because the dreams that we have are pivotal. And if you're not dreaming, there is certain foods, or you need to decalcify that optic thalamus and that pineal gland, because the clearer, the less calcified it is, the more clearer your dreams will be, and the more you'll remember them. So anything to record it, yeah. Dictaphone. Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. And it's always good to be half asleep as well when you're doing it. So when you first wake up, try and kind of like still be in that semi-dream state and just start to write it, or you know, whatever you can get. It doesn't, you know, whatever you can remember, even if it's like a sentence, you know, that will actually help you. So, moving on. So yeah, the anima will be the good, wise woman that helps the dreamer in his ordeal. So when the dreamer has a negative relationship with his mother, or with the anima, with your own mother. This is something, if you've had a negative relationship with your own mum, you men out there, the anima will be negative as well. She will appear as negative. She's the voice that will endlessly repeat, I am worthless, I can't do nothing, nothing makes sense. So if that voice in you, that's part of the repressed anima, or the unhealthy anima in males. That's why male depression is really high, you know, in the Western world especially. It's huge, because people are not aware, like especially the guys, not aware of this aspect of themselves. The anima is the feminine archetype, and thus of a nature that goes beyond the personal level, same as the animus. A part of the anima is personal and should be integrated by men, but when they can't make the distinction between the personal anima and the great mother, then they will become anima possessed. So we're going to the anima possessed men.
Sorry, who's the great mother?
The great mother archetype. Mother Gaia, Earth, all these goddesses, these are all aspects of the anima within psyche, within man. So just religion is created through this inner spiritual experience with the anima. That's why you get the god, you know, the goddess and the god. You always get the dual, right? So that's what it is. Yeah, but negative is not necessarily negative as we think it is. Yeah. So it's just duality again. We come back to duality. So where was I? So men that are anima possessed are often very spoiled by their mothers. So mums, watch out. Don't spoil your kids too much. Which makes them effeminate, jealous, mean, sensitive, vain, irritable, sentimental, and unable to cope with the hardships of life. And this is the thing about spoiling children. They need a bit of toughness. They need a bit of allowing them to face a bit of danger. If you're trying to make everything sort of, you know, keep them safe. I don't know about you, but when I grew up in Norway, a place called Svarstad, and it was in the countryside, and because it was safe there, I was allowed to go and play out when I was 5, 6, 7, on my own with the other kids. Parents weren't there. We'd get up to all sorts of things, and we'd do dangerous things too, and we'd learn. Even puddles. I remember one friend brought some cream out from their fridge and mixed it with some mud, and we started eating it. And I was still all right, but I learned quickly that was disgusting. But, you've got to allow children to have these experimentations. If you're always trying to keep them within boundaries, what happens is they don't develop confidence in themselves when they get older. So, yeah. But I digress. So, sometimes they even wish to change into women through castration, right? The anima-possessed male. And sadly, this happens really, really young, as we can see in the whole gender agenda that's unfolding before our eyes today. And now you've seen them come out at the age of 18, 19, regretting changing their genders. And there's huge cost to it. But this is in the extreme circumstances. So these men are not developed. Have not developed the animus, and it appears in their dreams as their mother or another large woman. Another kind of anima possession is excessive erratic fantasies. So, this is a very crude and primitive aspect of the anima. It makes men daydream compulsively about pornographic material. So, the anima possessed man uses a lot of pornography to arouse himself. And we know pornography is part of the whole mind control agenda to destroy, again, the male sexuality. So, anima possession is the destructive illusion that lures man into suicide, which makes her the demon of death. All right, so this is why, in the extreme cases, men commit suicide. The anima is also, in the positive side, the inspiration, a symbol. The anima is also often depicted as a redhead. I get blonde a lot as well in my dreams. But, it depends. She appears as a beautiful woman, in your dream. So always watch out and watch out with how you're relating to her in the dream, what kind of relationship you're having. So you get fairies, witches, women that are half animal as well, like mermaids, and swan princes for the women out there. The swan princes. I'm not sure if that's.
Maybe you missed an S.
I think swan princess. That was it. Yeah, I missed it. The anima can also appear as an animal, a predator like a snake or a lioness. This is the primitive feminine nature in the dreams. So men are sometimes inclined to project their anima upon a woman. They call it love at first sight, right? In which they see their own anima in another woman. It's almost instant. But that's the whole illusion. That's what we get through the Hollywood films, love at first sight. Because it is anima possession. Love grows over time. It's not something that's instant. Love is earned. That's different. That's completely different. That is completely different. A baby boy that is unconditional. That's already it's already set as nature intended. So, but the mother also has a responsibility to not use the child as a form of emotional crutch, if that makes sense, over time. I'm not talking about in the beginning stages, because that is the most beautiful time between mother and child. And that is unconditional. I mean, you can't. I don't think there's any words for that feeling, right?
Best feeling in the world.
Yeah.
Being a mum is the best thing ever.
Yep. It's the most powerful thing you can do as a woman. Yeah. It's the most powerful thing you can do as a woman. But this. I'm hoping this presentation will help arm you with some knowledge that you can take away. And, because for me, I'm all about empowerment, empowering people with knowledge. And this is stuff that I've gone through for years, 5-6 years of reading so many books, listening to so many different presentations. Michael Tsarian's done a lot of work. I don't know if any of you have heard of Michael Tsarian. He's done some great work because he's aware of the conspiratorial aspects as well, and he's gone deep into it. But again, you've got to also do this work yourself. You can't just rely on a speaker to give you all the information. You have to do your own work and find out. But I'm just giving you today just a summary of what these concepts are in our psyche, so that you're able to become aware of it, so that you can see, if you do see it, come across it in your dreams or in your day-to-day life, this is something you can improve. Because growth never stops. I don't believe in, like, you become a grown man or woman and that's it, you stop growing. There's so much growth to do. It's endless.
We're a work in progress.
Yeah, we're all works in progress. And the more we can accumulate throughout our lifetimes, the more that soul that we have within us that's eternal can accumulate that wisdom. Because knowledge has to be turned and alchemized into wisdom. Otherwise, what's the point of knowledge? You know? So, men are sometimes inclined to project the anima upon the woman. We call it love at first sight, in which they see their own anima in another woman. They don't see a woman with her personality and her limitations and her individuality. They see their own anima in her. They project that on her. They feel like they know the woman, and she is the one looking. She's the one looking at her reflection in the water. So, well, maybe there was a grammatic error. He's looking at the reflection of his anima in the woman. The woman then just becomes that, and almost at the end here. So then they then become obsessed with her, but all that they see in their own is their own anima. That is why the anima is often depicted with a mirror, looking at her reflection in the water. She's a part that was missing in the man, in the male, the feminine part, the emotional and compassionate part of us. So that's the part of us that we have to connect with as males. Yeah, and it sees beyond the general rules of life, the part that swims in the deep oceans of mystery. So if you hear about the mystics, those are the men or even if female mystics, same thing with the animus, right? Those are the ones that are able to delve deep into their souls and connect with that inner realm that is connected to everything. So these men only have to realize that they can find this part within themselves. That way they won't project their anima onto women. However, some men are terrified by the anima because to them, this femininity is demonic. By repressing the anima, it will become demonic. So these men are stuck in a vicious cycle, and they will project their demonic anima onto women who they will see as an enemy, ultimately. That's why they don't treat those kind of men don't treat women well. Eventually, over time, they appear great on the surface when you first meet them, but over time, in a relationship, you get to really find out what they're about. Vice versa, as well for the women. So the first step is to establish harmony with the anima. Is for man to take his fantasies and feelings seriously. He has to start realizing that there is more than his conscience and reason. This way, a man can discover what his anima means as an inner reality. But the anima is a very delicate and vulnerable phenomenon. If you are too harsh on her, she will disappear into the depths of the unconscious again. So the mermaid who quickly disappears into the sea. We've seen these in the stories. So the development of the anima will go through 4 stages. The first, it is an Eve-like figure. You'll see her as an Eve-like figure, which represents pure instinctual and biological relation. In the second phase, the relation to the anima is more romantic and aesthetic. but still characterized by sexual elements. So yeah, if she's seducing you, you still got a bit of work to do. This is in your dreams, by the way. In the third phase, the anima is like the Virgin Mary. She raises love to spiritual devotion. In the final phase, the anima is pure and sacred wisdom. She has a prophetic gift and she is divine inspiration. She's the archetype of life, the light of nature. Since light can't speak, she will appear in the unconscious as the Logos. For example, the Word of God. For example. Don't want to get into institutionalized religion. So, coming up to the last aspect of this presentation, a brief overview of the psychosomatic. So the definition in the dictionary is of or relating to the physical symptoms that are thought to generate from mental or emotional causes. Relating to or concerned with the influence of the mind on the body and the body on the mind, especially with respect to disease. So, two words, psyche and soma. Psyche from the Greek word psyche, the soul, mind, spirit, life. So actually essentially means your soul. Your psyche is your soul. So when we think about psyche, we're not thinking about the brain. It's an intelligence in your soul. That's your consciousness. And that's where people go wrong with the whole psychology thing. They think it's something to do with the brain. Brain's just a tool. Yeah, exactly. Links to the cloud. Yeah. Yep. It's a Well, the body is the motherboard. Yep.
The case is your body. The motherboard is where you come into the earth, yeah? And you've got the processor, which is the brain. It's all there for you. So you've got the camera, you've got the audio cards, graphics cards. It's all there. They're telling you in your face.
Well, it's a hermetic principle, as above, so below, as within, so without. So again, it's using those. So yeah, so it's the animating principle, the entity which occupies and directs the physical body. Soma, from Greek somatikos, of the body. From soma, which is the body. So it all means the body. So, and why do I talk about this? Because the body is the manifestation of the psyche, the health of your body, how you are. I'm not talking about born with defects and things like that, but essentially, the way you're treating your body, like obesity or anorexia, for example. You know, these are forms of what Wilhelm Reich calls armoring. It armors you from yourself, using it as a crutch to distract yourself from doing the real work on yourself. That's why people overeat, because they don't want to feel. They want to stuff themselves. Same thing with bulimics and anorexics. They starve themselves to a certain degree where it's unhealthy. You know. Not to say fasting is great for you, but I'm talking about people who have this sort of dysfunctional relationship with their own bodies. Yeah, it all comes from the mind. Well, and the body too. The body is the mind. The mind is the body. So, and well, that's a whole other talk in and of itself. But yes, when you Yep. This is when you come out of your self-projected image of yourself. Yes, yeah. That awareness is more than what you are. Yeah, yeah. So when we're talking about the psychosomatic, we have to talk about Wilhelm Reich. Not very popular in the mainstream. This man, in fact, was put into prison after all his research papers and his lab was taken down by the FBI, and he died in prison mysteriously, just a bit like Dr. Sebi as well. They always seem to kill these people that always contribute to our development and try to give us something that's useful and empower us. So Wilhelm Reich was an Austrian doctor of medicine and a psychoanalyst, a member of the second generation of analysts after Sigmund Freud. Again, another student, another one where the whole modern psychology movement started. And again, he's somebody that also deviated from Freud. He was the inventor of orgone technology. Is anybody here familiar with Wilhelm Reich? or Reich? Yeah, only one of you. Okay. So really, really important guy. Yeah, I mean, this all came from him. He's the one that bought the cloud busting technology, how to create orgons, anti-EMF. Sorry? Yes, that's the whole point. Yeah, yeah. I mean, not only is the technology he used, but also the therapeutics he was using psychosomatic therapies to cure people from trauma. So, yeah, he was the only student of Freud who saw that the libido, or sexual biological energy, was closely related between the body and the health of the psyche. He's the only one that kind of saw merit to Freud's, thing about the libido, where the others didn't really agree. Carl Jung didn't agree. Otto Rank didn't agree, but he was the only one that saw some merit to it. Freud didn't get it completely right. He got a kind of warped version of it. Yeah. So, just some quotes again from him, just to familiarize yourself with this man's thinking. So he says, the immediate cause of many devastating diseases can be traced to the fact that man is the sole species which does not fulfill the natural law of sexuality. The death of millions of people in war is the result of the overt social negation of life. This negation, in turn, is the expression and consequence of psychic and somatic disturbances in the life function. Does that make sense? So he's got a great book called The Function of the Orgasm, if you're an avid reader. Again, when we talk about sexual energy, the repression of it is no good. So anytime you're repressing it, that's also, you've got to find ways to express it healthily, and if you don't have a partner, get one. But work on yourself so that you can get a healthy one. It's that simple, so that you can have an amazing, an amazing sex life as well. So, but that takes connection. That takes genuine, authentic connection, because people, there's the animal type sex that we have, which is actually, there's lack of connection in what you call pornographic sex, that most people tend to kind of think is sex. But the world has lost the real way of actually having sex correctly, and we've lost that. And that's a whole talk in and of itself. You can go into Taoist philosophies on sexuality, raising the chrism, all these sort of things of seeing that these experiences can be very spiritual as well when you're in the bedroom, so to speak. It can be deeply spiritual if done the correct way. Okay, another quote here. Psychic health depends on orgastic potency, right? Because when you don't have that energy, that sexual energy stuck, you're not moving it. So upon the degree to which one can surrender to and experience the climax of excitation in the natural sexual act, it is founded upon the healthy character attitude of the individual's capacity to love. Psychic illnesses are the result of a disturbance of the natural ability to love. In the case of orgastic impotence, from which the overwhelming majority of people suffer, damming up of biological energy occurs and becomes the source of irrational actions. The essential requirement to cure psychic disturbances is the re-establishment of the natural capacity for love. It is dependent upon social as well as psychic conditions. Right? Great thinker, because he delved deep into the various works, and he really cared about humanity. I mean, look at his inventions. He really wanted to help people. But yeah, it's the capacity to love, because when we develop that in our formative years, even when we lose the functionality of our sexual organs, so to speak, there's different ways of getting excitation and connection. Our bodies are still, there's still other parts of the bodies. You hear about people who've been in wars that have lost, their sexual organs at the bottom, but they're able to orgasm through their body through different places of touching with their partners. So it's not limited to just the organ down there, so to speak.
Did you say exercise
Sorry. That's more kind of like that's more of a no, it's not adrenaline. No, when you're exercising, that is a form of stimulation that you're doing to yourself. So when when your muscles are contracting and relaxing, contracting, relaxing, what's happening is that you're releasing a lot of tension, but at the same time, it's like it's chemical hormones. There's a lot of hormones. Our bodies produce hormones through the muscles as well. So yeah, that's a different form of excitation. But it's all in that let's say under that umbrella, so to speak. But it's not as powerful as the sexual act itself between two people. It's very powerful. You know,
Training could include boxing training.
all types. Yeah.
Releases adrenaline. That's the point I was trying to
Yeah. Yeah.
That gives them a rush and a bit more, and it becomes addictive, and they can take hits and much. The normal person who hasn't done any boxing training can't take a hit. You know what I mean? Without
Yeah. But there. Yeah.
whacks, the stronger, you know what I mean?
There is a sort of limit to that. I've done martial arts for many years. I've been in a lot of sparring competitions. There is a state of flow you get into when you spar. But there can be an unhealthy relationship to becoming an adrenaline junkie as well. So you've got to be careful with that as well. So,
Finding a balance in all things.
yep, moderation is key. So Reich postulated that the existence of some kind of vital energy, which he called orgon energy, which is a combination of the words orgasm and organism. In his opinion, people had problems because they didn't let their energy flow freely. He rejected the classical psychoanalytic method of free association, and instead he proposed a new therapy that sought to unblock individuals through muscle stimuli. Again, the power of touch. I mean, they've even been studies done about mothers who didn't give touch to their children a lot, who are not affectionate, and how they grew up to be very cold and very stern and stiff, and lots of health problems as well in these children that grew up, where the ones that received a lot of love and touch and affection became much more healthier in society in general and in themselves. So
Can I just say something? I mean,
yeah.
it was about how we spoke about how the trauma starts within the womb as well.
Yeah, I did say that in the beginning of the presentation. Yeah, I mentioned Otto Rank's work.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
My own personal struggles.
Yeah. It starts in the womb, like I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. Yeah. But also to a certain degree, also the father as well, because the father's producing the sperm. So if the father, where he is psychically, that quality of that sperm is also affecting. Again, it is both, but the woman has the most majority of the say on the outcome of the child, because that's the power. And there is a book called Isonomy, the master keys of Masonic secrets. And I read this book. It was written by a Freemason. You can't find it easily, this book. And they talk about, essentially, that the key to controlling society are women, ultimately. Isonomy. Yeah, the Freemasonic master keys. I'll see if I can find a copy for you, because I only found it in PDF form. Isonomy. Yeah. Yeah, sure. I'll give you my email address. That's no problem. You give me your email, I'll send it to you. Really, really good book. But again, when you read these books, be discernful. It's Isonomy. If you want, just give me your email address, and I'll happily email you the PDF at the end of this presentation. Just come up and I'll take your email address. Okay. So yeah, he used muscle stimuli. It stemmed from the idea that repression was stored in the muscles, and it had to be unburied from there as well. So again, our bodies are the intelligence is not just in the brain. Memory is stored in the body too. I do these massages to release. I do these certain massages, very painful. It can be very uncomfortable, but it helps release. I know, Jay, you've experienced some of my special massages. There are ways you can do and learn these techniques where you're able to release even on yourself tension, especially in our arms, under here, the armpit. Massive. One of the most neglected parts, where you're able to use your thumb and cupping it here and really getting in. It's really uncomfortable. It's better to get somebody to do it for you, because there's a lot of stuff stored here as well. A lot of stress tends to get stored in the armpits area. Yeah. Yep. Acupuncture, Chinese acupuncture, same thing. Like, you want to get rid of a headache, you put pressure here, right between the thumb and the index. And you feel it. It's quite an uncomfortable feeling. But if you have headaches, you can just address it with that. Most of the time, it's lack of hydrogen, but hydration. But yeah, moving on. So. Wilhelm Reich became famous due to his character analysis and muscular therapy. At first, people genuinely believed his theories. He pointed out that the working classes were sexually repressed, which is why they were so submissive. Why? Well, why is pornography? Who's it targeted at? It's targeted at the masses. It's not targeted at the elite, And anyone that especially with the ultra rich. They educate their children to not go there. They already know about this stuff, right? So, yeah, so he ended up being expelled from psychoanalytic circles because he had these views, as well as from Marxist environment. He was a bit of a commie, but he left that ideology as well as he got older, those who's familiar with his work. And this was because he was too radical and rigid, which made his followers start rejecting his theories. So the basic principle of this treatment is the establishment of the orderly flow and metabolism of energy in the body. In this type of treatment, the clinician or individual tries to establish the flow of energy in a way that is natural and physiologically ordained from the ocular segment toward the pelvis. So in martial arts, or in when you do Qigong, for example, all the energy gets circled around the dantian area, which is more or less the bottom on the base of your spine, or your root chakra, the navel chakra. But actually, it's kind of, the charge starts between this area, and you can access that through breath work, through massaging the area as well, massaging this area, tapping, yep, movement, yeah. All that moves the energy up the spine, because the tree of life is your spine and your nervous system. That is what the tree of life is. That's what the Druids were talking about. It wasn't just the trees in the groves. They were talking about our bodies. They had knowledge. The ancients of this land had knowledge, real science. Again, another thing that they try to disconnect the Europeans from is their own heritage. It's all there if you take the time to research. But this was the world over. Everyone who knew the Arya, the true Aryans, right, which wasn't just a white race, it actually means those of noble trait. If you look up the etymological term for it, or those with light who are enlightened. That's what enlightenment means. You're able to tap into that part of your body to awaken that immortal soul, to awaken the spirit within. So obstruction in the flow of this energetic stream causes psychiatric and physical illness. So Jay talked about food, but there's also the psyche. The psyche also contributes to illnesses, because stress, right? Stress is one of the number one killers as well. It creates an acidic environment in the body when you stress. So the food is one aspect. The other aspect is our own psyche, our souls. Yeah, what we feed our mind. Yeah, exactly. That's another form of feeding. Absolutely. So here's a little diagram from one of his books in The Function of the Orgasm. It's not about sex, by the way. It's not all about sex, this book. If you actually read it, it's so educational. So when you think about it, it's a lot more to do with that. But he was just a great Western thinker who thought deeply about this orgastic energy that we have, this potential within us. And it doesn't matter about age either. All of us have it, no matter what age. It's about awakening the body a bit, using the stimuli and using breath work and tapping into the energy field, or chi, as we call it. Breath work, it exists. You can really, really use it. And I've seen, really amazing thing. Jay's pulled up some amazing. Me and Jay, we do a lot of chi work, energy work, and I've seen a guy called Master DJ, which is a banned Sky 3 documentary many years ago. He lights up fire with a newspaper, just using his chi, his energy. Yeah, Master DJ. Yeah. Afterwards, because he hurt somebody. Yeah. So he's a very sensitive man, very, very, very beautiful human being. He wanted to teach the world about this existing, because, it's something that we lost. We also had this, but people lost the knowledge, and this is how these enemies of life are able to do what they do and get away with, because they're able to suppress knowledge and not give us a real education. This is why it's important to become autodidactic. You have to become self-taught, self-knowledge, self-educated. That's what autodidactic means. Just educate yourself. Don't just trust my word for it. Go and do your research. You're all researchers here, otherwise you wouldn't be in this room. Full stop. So you're all proficient at it. So yeah, soma and the psyche. Again, we get the duality. The body and the soul, matter and spirit, comes from the single source of biological energy. That source is what we call the infinite awareness, the God within, whatever you want to call it. Right? It's there. The soul in power, is the power, and we've got to tap into this energy in order to have a more enriching life and more presence as well. How present are we from day to day with ourselves and with others? Because there's attacks everywhere. One of the biggest ones is radiation. Nobody talks about, I think people who are aware of 5G and that know that radiation affects the body hugely, massively. So, again, becoming aware of energy is really important. So I'll finish off with this quote. This is his version of God. I wouldn't say it's my personal one, but still to share it with you. He says, "I know what you call God really exists, but not in the form you think. God is primal cosmic energy, the love in your body, your integrity, and your perception of the nature in you and outside of you."
All that was, is, and shall forever be.
Yep. So with that, I finish my presentation. Thank you very much.
I know the time will come when we welcome everyone, yeah. Even the young and the old. We hate to see